I would like to welcome Fatima. We've been on this issue for a while, right?
Yeah.
Thank you for honoring the invite.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
So, Fatima,
Yeah.
can you tell us your full name
Yeah.
and where you come from in Africa? Because for the sake of our non-African viewers, Africa is a continent with 54 countries. So,
Yeah.
over to you.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit of a blend in the sense that I have been born in Zimbabwe, and then I migrated to Australia, and then I got married to a Zambian, and then I lived in Zambia for 10 years, and now I'm back in Australia. So I think that in terms of like countries, it's mainly the Southern African countries, so Zimbabwe and of course now Zambia. And obviously my heritage and my background is Indian, so you know we have like 4 or 5 generations born in Zimbabwe, but prior to that we are of course heritage wise from India. But during the war, like when it was still India before it split into India and Pakistan, like our ancestors of course wanted to go to a better life because it wasn't very good situation there, so they all jumped on boats and they ended up in all different parts of Africa.
Wow.
Because I think those at the time that was really common trade route. So yeah, if someone says to me that like, you know, are you Indian, I'm like, I'm not only Indian, I'm a blend of everything. But yeah, definitely my most recent 10 years is in Zambia, so I have spent most of my career there. Yeah.
Wow. That means you are multicultural.
Yes, that's why I say I call myself a blend. I'm not just one.
She's not just one.
Yeah.
She's everywhere.
I'm
She's
a
from
blend.
everywhere. That's
Yeah,
why
for
she's
sure.
beautiful. Generally, we know diet as the kinds of food that people eat or animals or. But when you hear about cultural dietitian, what does it mean?
Yeah. So I actually decided to call myself a cultural dietitian mainly because I spent so much time working in Zambia and with people from different, places. And even when I was working in Australia, when I first graduated, the reason that doctors were sending clients to me and the reason that clients were coming to me was because of the commonality and, she understands our foods and she's not going to give us, and I'm going to say it, white people food where it's like, we don't know what that is or it's too expensive or whatever it is. So she understands our culture and, so that's where it came from. It's that diets look different in different cultures.
That's true.
And you have to be able to take that science or that knowledge of what is healthy eating or what is a healthy diet, and you have to apply it to the culture. You can't just take a random Western diet and make someone follow it when they've never tasted that food before or they don't like it. It just doesn't make sense. So I was there to fill that gap on translating that knowledge into something that people recognize.
Yeah, I could remember some time ago I had problem with my gut. Anything I eat, it just comes out straight.
Yeah.
So my GP told me go and see a dietitian.
Yeah.
So when I got there, I was actually looking for someone that understands my food.
Yeah.
But I couldn't get. But I had to end up with a dietitian or a dietitian, and she had to give me Cocoa Pops and white bread, which I don't really like. But it worked anyway. It worked. So was that the reason why you went into this career path? Because I know you were doing your master's sometimes.
Yes, so in terms of why I became a dietitian, that's slightly different, like my reasoning. I enjoyed cooking in the sense that I found that element fun in life, and then I also really, really liked the science element of things, right? I liked learning how the human body worked, and I also liked the food side. And I also had a best friend who really struggled with an eating disorder.
Okay.
So a blend of just like a passion of wanting to help her, but then I also wanted to do this. And then I learned that there was this thing called a dietitian because one of my cousins became a dietitian. And so I looked it up and I was like, this is perfect. I don't have to become a doctor. I don't have to study for 7 years. I can literally just do this and I can still get involved in food and cooking. And I did my degree in nutrition and I was like, this is not enough. I want to do dietetics, right? Which is where you become a dietitian. And then I did my master's in that. And when I was doing that, I was like, okay, yes, this is what I wanted to do. Yeah,
wow.
I really, really enjoyed my master's. It was 1.5 years, very hands-on and just so, I guess, aligned with who I was as a person and what I wanted to do. So, it sort of started as one thing and then that's where it ended up. But I guess my career has taken me in different places since then as well.
So now you are based in Australia.
Now I'm based
offering services in diets.
Yes. So I started off my career in Brisbane. So I would get clients through doctors and I worked for 2 years. Then I got married and I moved to Zambia. And in Zambia, I realized very quickly that being able to attract clients because no one knew what a dietitian was a bit difficult. So I actually landed a job as a lecturer at the University of Zambia, which was really fun because I got to be lecturing what they call clinical nutrition to the first degree in nutrition in the country, which was really such a wonderful opportunity that just came my way. And I always say just God sent it to me. Like, how else does it happen? You don't just have great stuff like that.
Wow.
So for 4 years I lectured. And I really enjoyed that, but I still missed connecting one-on-one with people and helping people. As much as I loved my students, that's where my jam is. Like, I love that, right? So I slowly brought myself back into that space. And then I was working at hospitals and all sorts of different places. And I would do work with banks and do corporate nutrition. I have my toes in a lot of different pools.
So are you the only cultural dietitian or do you have an association?
So I actually built a company in Zambia called Eat Smart Nutrition. And I still have consultants and I'm still running my business in Zambia. So a lot of the students that I taught, they became my consultants and they are running the clinics and a few things and I manage it from here. But now I've spent most of my time working online and building an online presence as well as slowly starting to see people in person in Brisbane now.
Okay. So do we have enough representation in cultural dietitian?
Well, it's so interesting that you asked this question because I went to a conference just 2 weeks ago, right?
Oh, okay.
So I saw the representation. It's a dietitians conference. So I saw the representation of dietitians and no, there's barely 5% of us that are diverse and well represented from what I saw.
5%?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably... You're out there, but maybe you're not participating and you're not getting more involved. But most of the research that we use is all based on very biased individual groups of people. So let's take a really classical example, BMI. Right?
Yeah.
Everyone uses their BMI to decide if they're overweight or if they're underweight or we use that. But the BMI study was actually done on 70 Caucasian men. So not even a diversity of two genders, but one gender and also one race and ethnicity. And now I always tell people, I'm like, can you imagine I'm applying this now to an African lady in front of me when it's just so far from the right representation.
Yeah, the representation.
So I think that's a big area of passion of mine is just noting that gap in research. We're applying all these standards, but the standards were created from something very different. Yeah, and I mean, I can go on and give you multiple examples, right?
So how do we encourage our young ones into going into this career path since we don't have enough representation? 5% is too low.
Yeah. So depending on where you are in the world, of course, there's many different degrees, right?
Yeah.
We have got different countries that offer different levels of qualification. You can do a diploma. Or you can do a full bachelor's degree, or you can do a master's.
Okay.
So it just depends where you are in the world, but every country has a degree or something like that available.
Yeah.
And even some of the countries that it never used to be there, now in the last decade we have really boomed. So it's almost everywhere, and you can also do it online if you really wanted to.
Yes.
There's some great stuff out there.
So let's come to our food.
Mm-hmm.
Some people of thought says, African food is bad, like fufu, palm oil and so on.
Yeah.
And they throw them out of their diets. And some people say it's good. Some people will take this little here, little there. I want to ask, is our food really, are they good or bad?
Yeah, so any culture, any diet is going to have foods that are considered, I guess, foods that you eat every day, right? So you can eat them in good amounts. And you're going to have sometimes foods, right? And sometimes foods usually have, I guess, things like certain nutrients that we know if we have in large amounts, it's not good for us. So some examples would be like refined sugar or what we call saturated fat. That's something that's linked to high cholesterol and heart disease. So those foods that are very rich in those, you just need them in small amounts sometimes. And the other foods which are rich in all the really great stuff, you know, fiber and all those things, you need to have them more. And in every culture, that's going to look different, right? So where does fufu fit? And where does palm oil fit? And where does, you know, your leafy greens fit? And there's just, all of them is just understanding how much do I eat? And is it an everyday food or is it a sometimes food, right? And that's all it is. But it's not about throwing things out and making them go away, because what ends up happening is misery, which doesn't last.
It doesn't last.
So if you're gonna say, "Oh, I'm gonna go on a diet," like, cool, you'll be good for like 2 weeks, and then what?
You
your period comes, you want to hit someone, and you eat, everything comes back, but it doesn't just come back a little bit, it comes back with a vengeance, and then you want to eat everything, right?
And that's not good.
So that's not the way to do it. You got to go back and understand your food, how much to have, and how often to have them, right? And that can apply to any culture.
Any culture. I think that's where you come in, like cultural dietitian. So, you know, since our foods, you know, they don't have nutritional labels, you know, so how do people measure, how do they know what amount do I need approximately? Approximately how much of gari, cassava, how much of palm oil do I need to put in this stew? So how do you intend to encourage people?
So there's a couple of guidelines that are out there that I use quite often, because I feel like it's very generalized and it applies to anyone, right? And that's something called the healthy plate model. Right, so the healthy plate model is basically a plate, and you'll see the plate is divided into half vegetables, a quarter what we call carbohydrates, and a quarter protein, with a little like tablespoon space in the middle for fats, right? So that's how you would distribute your food. So your job would basically be to look at understanding which foods are carbohydrates, right? Which foods are protein, and which foods are going to be vegetables, right? And which foods are going to be fats. So I tell people, you can honestly, for example, go onto my website, download the free image, and use that. And then there's even a list of things that these are your carbs, these are your proteins, these are your fats. So I think as the most simplistic tool, that's probably the easiest thing to start with.
So all these measuring units, are they on your...
Yes, so that's a very general way of doing it, like just visually, but there's also a couple of little extra examples where some people will say to you, okay, the protein should be the size of your palm, and the amount of so for example, say you're having chicken, right? So maybe the amount of chicken is roughly this amount of your palm. And of course, I'm a different size to you and a different size to anyone else. So usually your palm represents what you need, right? So that's like for protein. Then for, vegetables, again, they tell you, there's some of the measurements are in cups. So they'll tell you 2 cups. So there's lots of different examples there, whether we're using cups or spoons or visually looking at something. But I don't believe in having to bring out a scale and measuring grams, because that's not life. You should be able to use the utensils on your table, right? Yeah. So you should say, if I want to know how much rice to have, how many tablespoons? If I want to know protein, roughly how much of my plate, or how many pieces of chicken. Like so, there's lots of examples that will all come into that. Yeah.
So let's come into health now, and food and medication. For example, people who have medical issues like diabetes, how do you How do you encourage these people? How do they navigate what to eat in our community? We are talking about, because our food is full of starchy foods, and when you talk about diabetes and obesity, and how do these people? How would you encourage them to navigate?
Yeah. So again, when it comes to different medical conditions, there are different guidelines, right? So if we're going to use diabetes as an example, we know that diabetes needs to be, your starches or your carbohydrates need to be controlled. So my job would be able to be, number one, educate the person in front of me. These are your carbohydrate or your starchy foods, and this is how much you need to have of them at each meal in order to keep your blood sugars in check. And then I would also tell them, but you can have more of this, and you need to add more vegetables to your plate and things like that. So that's just one example of how we would do it. It's very similar when you look at the basics of healthy eating versus management of chronic diseases like high blood pressure, diabetes. The advice is so close. Like there's only small tweaks and changes. Like if someone has high blood pressure, I'll be like, hey, we need to look out for that salt. If someone's got heart disease or high cholesterol, I would say, hey, we need to keep an eye on the palm oil or the fat on the meat. So there might be certain nutrients that I would highlight to them, but that foundation is always the same.
Oh, yeah. Cool.
Yeah, which it makes life a lot easier, because I say, okay, you're making this change to your diet. Everyone in your family can actually eat like this, and it's going to benefit them, because that's the basis of healthy eating.
Beautiful.
For you need to focus on this a little bit extra, be a little bit stricter with this one thing.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's good. Yeah. So for the sake of our viewers, please, if you have any questions, I'm looking at it, I will read it, and I will ask our guest. There's a question here. It says, being a cultural dietitian, are you specialized in only cultural foods or generally all kinds of food?
Yeah, great question. So I have studied in the sense that I understand the basics of how food works, right? So no matter which culture you're from, I'm going to be able to do it. So all foods, even the foods that you're talking about, which may be our general, I think you're referring to Western foods. Of course, I that's where I look at a lot of examples, and research comes from that. So it's a matter of me just taking that information and adapting it to you, right? So yes, whatever diet you follow, whichever part of the world you're from, whether you're from Africa or Europe or wherever it is,
or Australia,
anything, you can do all of it. I just like to call myself that, because I think there's a gap in identifying that culture plays a very big role in even our identity. Like food is your identity.
Yeah,
right?
It
really culture, is. Yeah. We get together around food. When we're sad, we reach for food. Food is very deeply rooted in us, and it's very complex, which is also why there's a lot of psychology elements as well.
I hope that answers your question.
So yeah, in a quick answer, the answer is yes.
I hope that answers your questions. I think that is GMX family. So when a client comes to you and they tell you their problems, their medical histories and everything, do you just take a pen and a paper, or you just go on your system and say, this is a meal plan, you can go? Or does your service transcend that?
The meal plan is the misconception that a lot of people have, is that you're going to go to a dietitian and they're just going to give you a meal plan, right? And the reality is, if that was that easy, we could all download it from the internet and it would work.
Really?
Because what's the difficulty that people have? It's not being told, here, do this. It's actually doing it. So 95% of what I do with my clients is actually showing them how to implement the information that they need. So if they need to eat more vegetables, cook their foods differently, whatever it is, I'm going to go through the process of showing them how to do it. So yes, you're going to get a meal plan to give you guidance, but there's a lot of what we call motivational interviewing, psychology, where we are like your support system. I'm going to learn about your house and your environment and who does the cooking and all of those things. I'm going to give you very specific ideas to your thing. And then I'm the kind of person also that once the client leaves my door, I also check in on them, and I'll either send them a message or email, how's your week? What's happening? And we have different systems set up. So because, again, 12 years, I know what happens. If that person walks out my door, I probably won't see them again if things don't go right. So I don't let them go. I just hound them.
There's someone here, Uche Ibe. He says, I like the word cultural dieting. Reflects more on one's culture and heritage.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that is. So I want to ask you this question: what, if you are doing it or it is in the future? What are you doing to integrate like cultural diets into the global structure?
Yeah. So I think one of my goals, to be honest, is to bring together other dietitians from different cultural backgrounds and not try and do this by myself, but do it as a team.
No one can.
I truly believe in that. And I really have a lot of people that I network with, and we have different agendas and things that we've been working on, in the sense that we want to create the research, we want to change the guidelines.
We need that.
We want to have more resources that when you go on the internet and you're going to search for, diabetes or whatever, I've done the search. There's a handful out there. If, again, we're using the example of African diets, there's literally a handful where you can go download for free and just see your foods, right?
That is great.
So aside from social media, which there are some amazing dietitians who are focusing on different things. So like there's some people who are Latina and they're really focusing on their foods. There are some people who are from like Trinidad and Tobago, they're really focusing on their foods. So if you're in the online space, there's a lot of dietitians that have really focused in on their heritage foods. Follow them. You're going to get great information. But collectively, I hope in the bigger sense, it's going to now, that information is going to seep into curriculums, in the sense that dietitians, when they study, they will learn about all of the different diet types. So I actually created like what they call a presentation, like was called professional development. After a lot of health professionals graduate, they have to do at least 30, 40, 50 hours every year of continuous learning to keep their accreditation. So I did a webinar, I think they call it a webinar, on African diets. Wow. And other dietitians are now watching that to learn about it. So if they have clients and they're interested, they're coming and increasing what they call their cultural competence to learn about African diet. So I'm hoping to do that more in different spaces as well. So small things to eventually get to the bigger stuff, where we can influence and make recommendations that are for the population that represents everyone.
Oh, that is beautiful. That is good. So if you are online, if you're watching this and you are in this space of dealing with food, so are you encouraging people to partner with you, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm the kind of person, like when it comes to my career, I love the diversity of things that it allows me to do, right? So whatever it is, whether it's going to be a cooking class or if it's going to be coming to talk to a community at an old age home, like there's so much diversity on where we can educate and what we can do and collaborate, culinary nutrition workshops. There's just, the ideas are endless. So yes, if you're out there, you want to learn more, you've got a community that you think could be influenced, you want to collaborate together, do something, create something. Yes, I'm all keen, I'm always ready. And that's just it, is being able to all network together to slowly add up to making change. Yeah.
That is beautiful. Oh. That is beautiful. So if you're out there, once again, she's here. At the end of the show, we'll put her details on the screen and you can get in touch with her. So let's come to weight loss. You're a weight loss expert. So what do you think is the main challenge of our people in our culture? What do you think is the main challenge of losing weight?
That's a really difficult question to answer, because weight loss is so complex, and I can have one person come to me and their cause or their issue might be that it's because they're simply not active enough, but they have a beautiful diet. Right? Some people, they genuinely are eating, everyone thinks that, maybe your diet is rubbish, like you've got heaps of sugar and you're eating too much, and a lot of people come to me with really good diets, but there's other things that are happening, like there's stress, or they're not sleeping properly at night, or they're not active. So it's very difficult for me to pinpoint one, because every person that walks through my door is very unique. So It's about individualizing what we need to do, right? But if I think I have to like generalize weight loss as a problem, it's misinformation. That's where everyone is going wrong. It's the expectation that you're going to lose X number of kilos in X amount of time. It's that mindset of what we've created weight loss to be. That's a lot of the reason why people fail. You know, there's a statistic that 98% of diets fail. Why? Because you cut out all the foods you love, and you try to do too much too quickly, and then when you fail, you blame yourself, and you're like, oh, it's because I don't have willpower, there's something wrong with me. But it's the approach that you're using. So yeah, it's how you're going at it, I would say, is the biggest issue. There's misinformation on how you're supposed to do it, and so most people's perceptions on how they're going at it is different. And you know, you've seen in the communities what it's like. Facebook group, lemon and coffee weight loss group, 17,000 followers. I'm like, wow.
Wow.
So we're going to poop out all of our fat now. It's like the stuff that's out there. I'm like, come on, guys.
Come on, there's so many stuff out there.
No, I will have diarrhea, but I will lose weight. But you're not losing weight. You're just losing water. So it's a topic that we can like do a whole hour episode on when we delve into some of these things. So slow, sustainable changes. Whatever you change to your diet, you need to enjoy it. It needs to be something you can do forever. And it doesn't need to make you feel miserable. Otherwise, what's the point? You're going to lose 2-3 kilos in 1 week, but how long will it last?
How long will it last?
What's the point?
What's the point? Yeah. So you have to be consistent.
Yeah. So I always say sustainable weight loss. That's my goal. If someone comes to me and like, oh, I need to go to a wedding in 3 months, I'm like, go somewhere else. I'm not for you. Now you go. I'll send you to the Facebook community of lemon and coffee. I'm like, you're not for me. So yeah.
Do you think all these things work? The tea, group, they said they ask you to drink some kind of tea. Do they work?
Okay. So remember earlier I talked about the foundation.
Yeah.
That healthy diet.
Yeah.
That probably does 95% of the work.
Okay.
Right? Those extra things, they're just the little decorations on top. If you're going to do them by themselves, no, they're not going to do anything. There's nothing that would magically burn fat. Otherwise, no, there wouldn't be a worldwide epidemic of obesity. If it was that simple of just drinking a tea, then we wouldn't have a worldwide problem of obesity.
Everybody would just go and drink.
We just drink the tea, magic fix. So obviously, like the data is showing us that it's not going to work. It's years of habits that you've created that are unhealthy for you that you have to now go backwards and work on. You have to. If you don't build that foundation, I always give the example of a cake. If you don't have a good recipe for the cake, you can have a beautiful cake
outside.
And when you cut it and it tastes terrible, what was the point?
What's the point of making the cake?
It was just there to look good.
Yeah.
So you have to have a good recipe. You have to have a good recipe. Then you can put the pretty decorations on top and the little extra things some extra green tea or a little boost from this. And it's small. It's negligible enough by itself that it's going to fix your problem.
Slow, sustainable habits.
That's it.
I think that is stuck in my brain right now.
Yes.
Let me